Kia ora, I'm your host, and in today's Explainer, we are unpacking the heavy civil engineering reality and the absolutely massive financial burden of saving New Zealand's polluted inland lakes. You know, we constantly talk about the importance of protecting our environment, right? But rarely do we actually sit down and look at the itemized receipt of what it literally costs to reverse decades of ecological damage. So let's get into the true costs of restoration. Let's jump right in by starting with the acute environmental crisis at Lake Taupō-nui-a-Tia. This isn't just a minor ecological imbalance. We're talking about a heartbreaking reality where severe stormwater pollution and invasive species have mixed into a toxic cocktail. When a community wakes up to mass fish deaths, well, it forces a really hard, immediate look at exactly what is washing off our streets and into our waterways. To get to the bottom of this, we'll quickly cover our Ailing Inland Lakes, the public infrastructure challenge, alternative restoration strategies, and finally, evaluating the true cost. All right, Section 1, our Ailing Inland Lakes, a history of harm. We really have to start by acknowledging the tension between our historical industrial past and our modern environmental crises, because we certainly didn't get here overnight. The contrast across New Zealand is wild. On one hand, you have Lake Rotorua in Hamilton, which is dealing with the ghost of its past, lingering arsenic contamination from old historical weed control methods. And then on the other hand, you have Lake Taupō-nui-a-Tia in Cambridge, suffering from a very modern crisis, where sudden, severe urban runoff is literally suffocating the ecosystem. Different lakes, totally different poisons, but exactly the same desperate need for intervention. So how are we fighting back? Well, scientists are essentially playing ecological detective. And they aren't just scooping up water in a bucket anymore. No way. They are deploying some incredibly innovative monitoring tech. We're talking about autonomous, robotic kayaks that navigate the waters to map these underwater environments in real time. They can track the exact sediment changes and pollution levels. It's cutting-edge science giving us a precise diagnosis. But, as we're about to see, knowing the problem is only half the battle. Which brings us to Section 2, the public infrastructure challenge beyond residential drainage. Actually fixing these lakes requires massive, heavy-duty public infrastructure. You can't just plant a few nice trees on the bank and call it a day anymore. You need highly advanced solutions, like a civil-engineered linear bioretention swale. Now, this is not just a ditch. It's a highly viable, water-sensitive trench design that perfectly mirrors standard urban design guidelines across the country. It uses this complex underdrain system to actively filter polluted runoff before it ever even has a chance to hit the lake water. And here is where things start getting really expensive. Council-grade projects operate on an entirely different scale than fixing a drain in your backyard. Before a single shovel even hits the dirt, councils have to navigate an absolute labyrinth of resource consents. They have to conduct vital cultural impact assessments with Mauna Lanawa to respect the land, ensure all underground utility assets are protected, and then hire heavy civil contractors. This massive administrative and logistical scale is exactly why public infrastructure costs soar. Let's actually break down how you build one of these filters from the ground up. Because transforming a muddy lakebed into a highly engineered ecological filter is a rigorous four-step process. First, you have careful excavation and the very expensive off-site disposal of silt and clay. Second, you lay down wrapped perforated pipes in gravel for drainage. Third, and this is super crucial, you can't just use regular dirt. You have to add a specific engineered sand and compost biosoil that won't clog up over time. And finally, you top the whole thing off with native wetland plants, like Carex virgata or oioi, to naturally pull nutrients right out of the water. But okay, brace yourselves for the financial reality here. When you tally up that specific biosoil, the solid PVC crosspipes needed to route the clean water, and all that careful excavation, the civil construction cost for that continuous trench hits a staggering 450 to 850 New Zealand dollars per linear meter. Just imagine trying to wrap that kind of price tag around an entire lake. Moving into Section 3, alternative restoration strategies, finding a better way. Because that steep price means a standard 500-meter continuous stretch could easily cost over 400 grand. Councils like the Waipa District Council absolutely had to look at alternative configurations. They basically had three main engineered alternatives to balance out the ecological benefits against physical space constraints, like making sure they don't destroy existing mature tree roots. You've got Alternative 1, node-based rain gardens, Alternative 2, proprietary underground filters, and Alternative 3, permeable interlocking concrete pavers. Let's look a bit closer at what these actually mean in practice. Now, alternative 2, an underground heavy-duty concrete filtration vault, sounds totally brilliant on paper, right? I mean, it has zero visual footprint, you can hide it right under a car park. But the slightly funny, completely unglamorous reality is the hidden maintenance. Councils have to regularly pay for massive vacuum trucks to come out and literally suck out all the trapped rubbish and heavy sediment from these mechanical chambers. It turns into a long-term logistical headache. And that is exactly why Waipa District Council went with the pragmatic choice, alternative 1. Instead of digging up kilometers of continuous parkland and tearing right through tree roots, they opted for node-based rain gardens. By strategically retrofitting these high-capacity rain gardens and gross pollutant traps only at major street intersections, basically right where the biggest stormwater pipes dump into the lake reserve, they achieve a massive environmental impact while completely preserving the park's natural beauty. But, cheaper is a highly relative term in civil engineering. Their Stage 1 budget to install just 12 of these localized rain gardens and 3 proprietary traps still came to a hefty $356,000. It perfectly illustrates that even the most pragmatic, space-saving option remains a massive financial commitment for local ratepayers. Which leads us to our final section, Part 4, Evaluating the True Cost, the Final Bill. Let's pull all these disparate numbers together to see the big picture. To put this into perspective, simply pouring a standard, unreinforced concrete public footpath is relatively cheap, about $180 to $280 per meter. But the very second you try to do right by the environment, whether that's using dual-purpose permeable pavers that act as a filter or building a full linear bioretention trench right beside the path, boom! The price absolutely skyrockets, reaching up to $850 a meter. And of course, nature doesn't always play nice with our beautiful new infrastructure. If you want to stop the very lake you're trying to save from eroding the walkway through wave scour, you actually have to physically reinforce the bank. Adding an engineered timber or low concrete retaining edge directly to the lakeside bank tacks on an additional $300 to $600 per meter. The costs literally just keep compounding. It is a massive, multi-generational financial burden for our local councils and communities to bear. So as we think about the robotic kayaks, the specialized biosoils, and those $350,000 rain gardens, I want to leave you to ponder this final thought. Is the steep price of modern civil engineering the only way to pay for the sins of our industrial past? Or is there a limit to what ratepayers can realistically afford to restore nature? I really hope this explainer brought some clarity to the true costs of restoration. Thank you so much for joining me today, and please check the link in my bio to watch more of my explainers.